Greetings, students. Mr. Little here, and today we're going to talk about how to contextualization. That is, how to write a contextualization statement. Now, your contextualization statement is designed to set up your essay. It's designed to set the stage for your thesis statement. It is the first or second thing you write in your essay, but it throws a lot of people through a loop. So today, let's break down how you can write an effective contextualization statement. This presentation, along with other videos in this series, are using the 2019 Portuguese and Indian Ocean DBQ from AP World History. However, even if you're an AP Euro or AP US, the DBQ is the same in those classes as well. So feel free to follow along. You can go to the link or access the slides below. And this presentation will use excerpts from graded student responses to help demonstrate examples from the essays that earned points. So your contextualization statement, where is it? In the general DBQ outline, your contextualization statement is in your very first paragraph. It is the first thing that you write. It is 3 to 4 sentences, and it comes before your thesis statement. So when it comes to how do you approach contextualization, how do you approach setting up an essay, there are a number of approaches that teachers and people smarter than me have been creating and promoting for a long time. So for example, there's the rainbow concept of contextualization. That is a rainbow, various layers, large ideas, and then zooming down to specific events that are connected more directly to your topic. There's also something called the title crawl, because contextualization, much like the title crawl, sets the stage for a Star Wars film. Now, I like the title crawl because I am, in fact, a big Star Wars fan. But here's the thing about the title crawl, and this is a good lesson for contextualization too, is that the title crawl for episode 4, A New Hope, doesn't talk about Knights of the Old Republic. And I know only some Star Wars fans are going to get that reference, but think of it this way. The title crawl for The Mandalorian wouldn't talk about the Phantom Menace. You're not telling the entire story of humanity, you're just talking about your immediate prompt. You do need to demonstrate a flow of history and an understanding of history, but you're also not telling the entire story of humanity, which is why my approach that I teach my students, and I'm going to give you here, is called the reverse triangle. Essentially, you start broad and you get narrow, like a reverse triangle or a reverse pyramid. Now, the thing about this is that you need to make sure you don't just focus on your thesis. If you write a contextualization statement that focuses exclusively on the time period that your thesis is set in, or the prompt is set in, you're not going to get the point, because context needs to show that you understand the broader flow of history. And this is why I like the reverse triangle. The idea is you start with a broad statement about history before your event, something general, perhaps one of the course learning objectives or a course theme, or sort of a genuine truth that everybody understands, but you don't have anything super specific about it. Then you get a little closer and you maybe include a proper example, a proper noun. Maybe you move into the time period or the region specific to your thesis or your prompt. And then you have a third sentence in which there's a direct cause or event that precedes your thesis, time, and place. And then you might have a transition sentence, or you might just go right to your thesis. One last thing I want to talk about contextualization statements is called double dipping. If you mention something in your contextualization statement, a fact, a development, a person, a place, you cannot mention that again for points, because double dipping is not allowed. So if you talk about something like a car wreck in your contextualization statement, you then could not mention a car wreck again for, say, evidence beyond the document, complexity, or possibly historical context. So you've got to be careful about what you include in your contextualization statement, because you cannot double dip. Now, with that said, let's look at a few examples. Now, if you'd like, you could pause the video and read these slightly more in depth. The full contextualization statement is here on the side. However, I've broken it down as it goes in the sort of crooked, not totally straight pyramid that I've developed here. But notice, the first sentence is very broad. During the period of history, 1450 to 1750, that's an entire unit. That's unit 3 and 4. Many different innovations in technology and new forms of economy facilitated the increased trade. That's literally lifted from a learning objective. It is true, but it's not super specific. However, it does tell us that what we're going to talk about is between 1450 and 1750, and we're going to be talking about technology and economics of some sort. Then we get a little bit closer, right? Along with networks of trade such as the Silk Road connecting Eastern Asia to Central Asia and the Middle East, period, the Trans-Saharan trade route dominated by Arab merchants, and systems of seaborne trade and commerce throughout the Mediterranean, there developed a system of economy, forcing the control of the trade through maritime trading posts and ports rather than through conquest. So now we're getting a little more specific. And admittedly, the wording of that second sentence is a little off, but that's okay. The AP exam is treated as a first draft, not a final draft. But notice, we talked about trade in general, and now we're getting a little more specific. Now we're talking about trade in the Middle East along the Silk Road and the Trans-Saharan trade route. Admittedly, I think these two sentences are a little too descriptive. I think maybe mentioning one or two of these would have been fine, but this particular response just kind of throws all of the trade networks at you. However, it does have the effect of demonstrating that you understand that there were many trade systems at play during this time. And it also sets up the fact that the Portuguese are going to use trading posts and ports rather than through military conquest of the land. So it is setting up the essay itself. And then finally, we get down to the specific region or topic, which is such a system, mentioned before, the trading post system, was adopted by the Portuguese, who dominated the Indian Ocean trade via their trading post empire. Now we're ready to go into the thesis and talk about Portuguese transformation of the Indian Ocean trade network. Now, the one thing I would caution about this particular contextualization statement is that the mention of trading post empire precludes that from being mentioned again for any kind of points in the rest of the essay. Same thing with all of the trade networks that they mentioned above. If they wanted to use those for, say, evidence beyond the document or outside evidence, they now would not be able to. So you do have to be careful of double dipping. And just notice how, in general, these couple of sentences show us that the student has at least some knowledge of the general flow of history leading up to the Portuguese entry into the Indian Ocean, talking about new technology, new forms of economic trade, and then providing us with some examples of that before getting specific and talking about the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean. Let's talk about another one. The 16th century saw the rise of world exploration and overall increased global interaction. So that's true, right? The 1500s saw more exploration. We're thinking about, in my head, I'm thinking about Columbus, okay, and increased global interaction. Okay, generally true, but nothing specific, right? But we're setting the stage here, right? Then we get a little more specific. Europeans started sailing the globe to the Americas post-1492, Columbus's discovery of the Americas. Again, grammar not great here, but again, it's a first draft. That's not what we're concerned about. After Vasco da Gama sailed around the tip of Africa, the Indian Ocean experienced a merge of Europeans starting to trade in the Indian Ocean. We talked a little bit about increased global interaction, and then we're getting a little more specific. Again, Columbus, 1492, Vasco da Gama, the tip of Africa, right? We're getting more specific. We're still not quite at the Indian Ocean. It's mentioned there, but we're not right there. And then we get down to it. The first European country to explore trade in the Indian Ocean was Portugal, right? And this could even be a transition. This could be the transitionary sentence, potentially, if that's something your teacher requires. But now we're ready to talk about Portugal and trading in the Indian Ocean. We've set up the fact that there was lots of trade and there was lots of people going around sailing. We've even named a few of them. And so we've shown that we understand that in general, the years before the Portuguese entered the Indian Ocean was a time of great global interaction across the world, from the Americas to the Indian Ocean to Africa, as well as a time of sailing and exchange. Again, the double dipping caution applies here too. Vasco da Gama, I think, for this particular essay would be a great evidence beyond the document, since he's not mentioned in any of the documents. But if this particular student had wanted to do that, they would not have been able to get the points because Vasco da Gama is already mentioned in the contextualization statement. But now you understand what an effective contextualization statement looks like. Let me leave you with simply some final tips. You have to remember that your contextualization statement has to relate to your prompt, either thematically or content-wise. Notice that both of the contextualization statements we looked at talked about sailing technology and economic exchange. These are things that are connected to the prompt. Don't be talking about the agricultural revolution if your DBQ is about the Portuguese trade in the Indian Ocean. This kind of goes to the bottom tip, which is that you're not writing the whole history of humanity, and to keep it within a few hundred years of your prompt. Now, that's going to depend on when your prompt is set. So for example, if you're writing a prompt about World War II or the Cold War, contextualization could just be World War I. However, if you're writing a prompt about, say, the rise of gunpowder empires, you may go back a couple hundred years and talk about the Mongols. You're just going to have to use your best judgment on this. Finally, technically, but I don't recommend, you can put the context at the very end of the essay. I strongly do not recommend doing this because, one, you might just forget, but two, your reader is going to look for your context at the very, very beginning of the essay. They're going to look for it before they look for anything else, except maybe the thesis. So put it at the beginning of the essay. Don't put it at the end of the essay. And although officially context can discuss events that happen after the prompt, I also don't recommend this because you run the risk of not being able to relate it back to the prompt. If you're a very strong writer, I say go for it. You could talk about how the Portuguese opened up other Europeans to explore the Indian Ocean, which led to the English colonization of India. However, if you're not a skilled writer, I would simply say avoid talking about anything that happens after the prompt and focus your context on leading up to the prompt. You now know how to write an excellent contextualization statement, but I want to thank you for joining me. My name is Mr. Little, and I'll see you next time.